PATV presents Live from Prairie Lights, featuring the best authors and poets on the scene today. From up-and-coming to well-established writers from across the globe. You'll see them right here on PATV.
Now speak directly into the mic.
Here tonight we have it. So in Farmscape, we published both the play, and then there are 10 essays by major figures in the food movement, like Anna LaPay and Jean Logston, and major wonderful, terrific students who were part of the project from the very beginning, major wonderful producers who helped me get the play up and across. Well, now the play's it's toured all over the state. It moved into the Midwest. Now it's moving. It's moving in the. It's really interesting where it moves. Moving in the South and the East, and people that were willing enough to get up and act in the show. So we are going to have lights on. And we're going to do just a little snippet of the play for you. This is just a little taste of the play. So Laura Sweeney, one of the original students in the show, is going to play a character named Lana. Jason Arbogast originated the part of John, so he gets to play John again. And Harley is going to do Donald. And I'm going to do Christy. Okay, guys. Sort of.
I've been in my business as a farmer for about 9 years. Number 9. I've always been a gardener, but I've been growing food for other people for about 9 years. I like to grow this stuff. A lot of lettuce, cooking greens, herbs, lots of onion, garlic, and leeks, and lots of heirloom tomatoes. I'm Lana.
Number 68, Donald. I'm 68, almost 69 years old. I've lived in this state my whole life, and I can tell you, times change. My dad and granddad farmed in the 40s. They were the last of their breed. The horse would pull these mowers behind, and there would be a seat for the driver. I mean, everything was basically done by hand or with horses. For years, this was late 40s, early 50s. They were the last of their breed in this area. There was simply no money in the family. They never planted corn with tractors.
We both take care of the outside, whoever has time. I work off the farm at Iowa State University. I'm Christy, number 19. They have auction numbers, that's what the numbers are about. 19. I grew up in Omaha. I met Randy. He was 19. We have 750 sows. We farrow every week, every day. Farrowing is having the baby pigs. And we sell every week. We sell right about 300 every week to independent farmers. My husband's dad grew up here. My husband grew up here. And our kids grew up here except for the last 4 years. We lived here their whole lives. His mom helped on the farm and she drove the tractor. But we needed health insurance. We needed the pension, the benefits, but mainly the health insurance. And so that's why I went to work years ago. When I went to work, we were paying almost $600 a month in health insurance. That was 20 years ago. We've always had pigs here. And then 12 years ago, we went on contract. We built the building, and somebody else owns the pigs. And they supply the feed, the vet, and everything. They pay us so much per pig.
So they bring the pigs through on like this conveyor belt, right? From the truck to the conveyor belt. Then zap, bam, they're dead. And I don't know, somebody, I don't know who, it is my job, somebody darn near cuts their heads off so the blood can drain. They gut them too. That's the first thing I remember from the tour. All those friggin' heads just hanging there. It surprised me then. I don't care though. My job is to cut parts of them up later. Number 103. Oh, you want me to introduce myself? My name is John. I work at Tyson, the slaughterhouse. I cut up pigs.
If a hog is living in poop, First thing you gotta say is, that's not good. Of course you're going to say, it's awful. My response is to take the hog out of the poop and clean him up. The industrial model that only looks at money has blinded itself that the hog is standing in poop. All it says is, let's make the poop smell better. They're doing things at ISU and other places to make the poop smell better. The downside is starting to mount up. Things will change. I don't know why people want to deny the fact that eating meat that's been treated like that will have an effect on the eater.
My job is, well, it's darn gross. But yeah, so the dead gutted pig body is hanging from these clips on this line, right? And it moves from station to station.
How we treat creation is part of our humanity. I believe that anything we kill and use should be slaughtered respectfully, quickly, and well.
So the pig comes by in front of me. It's gutted, the head is hanging by a string, and different parts of it have been kind of strung up in different ways, all on different parts of the line.
I don't raise hogs myself. I do raise other animals. I do eat them, but not hogs. I do not eat hogs. I speak as a consumer and as a citizen of the earth. It's immoral what we're doing to hogs, and it's immoral what we're doing to ourselves, creating food that is marginally healthy.
My job is to yank the intestines right out of the body, pull them right out, but I don't detach them from the body. Somebody else does that.
I think that people should slaughter their own food. People who eat meat should help at least once. You've got to know this stuff. It's life and death.
I helped my grandson one day this summer. He needed help butchering chickens, and I used to work in a factory that did this back in the 60s. I do a couple hundred a day. Heck, the day I helped him, we picked 9. 9. We could have picked 50 in the fall as long as it took us. We did it all wrong. That was terrible that day.
My job, all day long, with both arms, is just to yank the darn intestines out of the body. Bitch of it is, too, that I'm so used to it, I won't even care anymore. I'll be thinking of, I don't know, Smashing Pumpkins, or Everybody Loves Raymond, all the while I'm pulling out intestines and splattering blood everywhere.
I did the killing that day. I'd hold them between my knees and bend their head backwards until the neck breaks. That's the way you do it. Cut their head off. Let them bleed out. That's a couple minutes. If the neck turns the right way, you'll get sprayed. It's a messy job. It's not a pretty thing. After they bled out, we held them by their feet and dipped them in a bucket, hot water, like 160 or 180 degrees. That loosens the feathers up. But ours hadn't feathered out. Couldn't get your hands on the feathers at all. It was terrible, just terrible. The factory's got these feather picking machines. We don't. So you got to do it by hand. 9 chickens in 7 hours.
Everything is on the edge. Everything is being pushed to the edge of safety, the edge of morality, the edge of sustainability. It's being pushed to the edge just for economic gain. As a community, we are endangering our humanity. So many good things for monetary gain. The way hogs are raised in these confinement facilities, it breaks my heart.
I have to wear this rubber raincoat dealie all over me. Rubber raincoat and the goggles and the helmet. It's funny too, at mealtime, because I work during breakfast and lunch, and I'm just covered in blood, man, just freaking covered in it. I eat alone every day because nobody wants to sit next to the blood guy. Even the other guys with the blood jobs, you know. They don't want to sit. Well, we all don't want to think we look that covered in blood. Even blood guys don't want to sit next to blood guys.
Some of the bigger hog confinement companies, they just put up the buildings anywhere, and people come and work it. But right around here, a place a mile to the west, they have, I don't know how many buildings, but Mark, the farmer a mile to the west, is another Century Farm. Mark is the 3rd or 4th generation, but he's all on contract.
It is a dumb job, you know. The work is friggin' hard. And that would be good if the pay was good, but the pay is not good. I do good. I don't have kids or anything, so I guess I'm good. But some of these guys have 5, 6 kids. That's not even counting the Bosnians. I don't know what they do. They stick to them, I stick to me. You know.
I remember when I was a boy, they'd pick corn by the hand. what they had were these narrow square box wagons with iron or wooden wheels that the horse would pull. You'd take the corn, throw it in the wagon, and when they'd walk past the wagon, they'd holler, "Giddy up!" And the horse would go. And when they wanted to stop, they'd yell, "Whoa!" Then at the end, they'd scoop the corn into the corn crib. There was a lot of work in them days. And Grandpa used to have a hell of a time with the horses. They just wouldn't do what they're supposed to do, but horses was everything. They planted corn with horse-drawn corn planters. They cut hay with the horse too, a sickle mower. They went from using the hand size to using these early sickle mowers. Then 15 years ago, I got the harebrained idea I could be a farmer. Bought a couple of small farms, 80 acres farmable. We tried to operate cheap as we could. We couldn't make any money either. You just can't. If you're a little guy, you can't. By the time we paid off the machines and the seed and the fertilizer and everything else, some years we were lucky to break even. So after 10 years of trying to be a farmer, I got out, sold the farms.
My son-in-law and daughter are another third generation, but the only way they can do it is through contract farming. The neighbor to the east has their third generation son starting with them, and they're big in crops, but they're also contract livestock.
My coworkers, I had suspicions with the Bosnians and Mexicans, feeling unsafe and stuff. But they're just making a living. I guess if I'm being honest, yeah, I'd rather be by more workers like me. I mean, who wouldn't?
When we first started contracting, they wouldn't loan us money unless we were contracting. You had to get bigger or get out and move to town. For some people, that's just not an option. It's just not in their blood to work in town.
So, I have a date a while back. Yeah, I had a date.
Yes.
Well, the Friday comes along, and all of a sudden, I can get some overtime. Our date's on Friday, too. So I have a choice. Date or overtime, right? Well, I think, screw it, I'll do both. So I call her and push the date back a couple hours. Do my thing, pulling guts and all that. And then I hop in the shower, go on my date. Only thing is, I didn't get to really shower. I mean, I showered, but I didn't really shower. Normally, if I'm going out, I take just one heck of a shower. Soak in the tub for about 50 minutes, then shower for about 45, go through a whole bar of soap, the whole deal. That way, I don't smell like I've been crawling around inside a dead animal all day. On this date night, I got maybe a 15-minute shower. 15 minutes. That was bad. The girl was nice, I guess. She didn't really say nothing, but you could tell she was uncomfortable. She didn't say too much at the bar since there was so much darn smoke. Half of it was for me. You know, I was smoking like a chimney trying to cover up the smell. We left the bar, though, and she looked at me like I was crap in a microwave. Tried to get a little something going on, but, you know, didn't work. I ended up spending most of my overtime on that dinner anyways. Sucked. But, yeah, that's my crap in the microwave story.
At some point in there, my father-in-law had expanded to bring my husband into the farm, so they mortgaged it, and I'm not sure of all the details at that point, but it ended up they lost the farm and started from scratch. They were able to work out a deal that they bought it back again. They paid off all the debts they had on it and had to buy it again. They're still paying for it now, 25, 30 years later. Now, Randy will probably shoot me if I say this, but all of a sudden one day he came home from where we live now and he said, "Mom and Dad found a place in town. They're going to buy it. We're moving to their place in 2 weeks." Oh, do I have a choice? No. Someone has to live with the pigs and Dad doesn't want to be the one in charge. Our pigs are there. We have to live there. Call the realtor. We've got to put our place up for sale. There was no discussion. This is one thing, and I'm still a little bitter about it. Rightfully so, I think, because I didn't have a choice. I was told I have to move, and it wasn't so much my husband telling me we had to move, it's his folks telling me we have to move. I think if they would have just said it all different, saying, "We're going to move to town, we really need you guys to come down here," that would have been totally different. But no, it was not presented that way. And I was not a happy camper. We planted trees the day we got married. We planted trees the day the kids were born. We just had a lot invested in that place. But it was a necessity. We had to be where the pigs were. Each of the essayists, that's included in the book here, is going to come up and read about 5 minutes of just a little snippet of their essay. And Laura Sweeney is going to begin. As I said, she was one of our original students. She was actually getting her PhD in sociology, but she turned out to be one of our finest writers. And she now has a business. We actually had romances spring up in this class. It was great. We had like two couples, and she and Jason have their own writing business, and so she's going to read a little bit from her essay. F is for.
I was different. One of Ames Iowa's best-kept secrets is the patio in the back of West Street Deli. It's a lovely garden, a sanctuary, where I can relax, enjoy the wildflowers, and hear the sounds of nature. When I need a break from my drab, clinical cubicle world, I go there. Accompanied by an iced tea, egg salad on rye, no spreads, I hang out, read, edit. One early September afternoon, I was editing the essays for my Corollaires project, a community arts project about a rural Iowa vocal arts group I'd sung in for about 10 years. Because of their 25th anniversary timeline, I had to focus on the documentary instead of graduation. I had intended to graduate in 2006, but a near-fatal car accident disrupted my life, and my plans for defending my thesis were sidelined as I focused on adjusting to life post-accident. As I worked, I recalled a recent visit to the orthopedic surgeon who had been attending me at McFarland Clinic. Even though my back injury wasn't a surgical issue, and there wasn't much he could do to resolve my pain, I appreciated my doctor's attempt to be reassuring, to show empathy and support. I even appreciated his sense of humor. He understood the dilemma I was in, being advised to limit my stress so I could heal, while at the same time facing the demands to complete graduate school. He joked with me once about the insistent F word. When was I going to finish? But his advice was unnerving. There was no definite prognosis, and I was left to my own devices to learn how to live day by day with a chronic injury. Having exhausted the medical options, I was in search of an alternative route to wellness. I had been consistently encouraged by my professors and told I was a good writer who should develop her craft. I was mulling over the possibility of enrolling in Mary Swander's English 557 course. The Corollaires project had been a good distraction as I was going through physical therapy, and perhaps Mary's class would also be therapeutic. Swander's course wasn't on my program of study, though, and it wasn't going to get me any closer to graduation any sooner. It might even sideline my thesis once again, so I'd be faced with the F word by my committee. When was I going to finish? Why dedicate myself to another project and community if it jeopardized finishing my degree? I believe in interdisciplinary work and projects, and I believe that if it was my calling to participate, in the end, the formal academic aspects would work themselves out. I was different. The Western model wasn't working for me, and I needed to think holistically, needed to cope with the ambiguity. My healing would take time, patience, and perseverance, and it would take a community. Later, after I had enrolled in the course, I returned to the West Street Deli patio to edit Daphne's monologue for Farmscape. Like Mary, I was inspired by how Daphne's life interweaves culture, arts, education, and ecology for well-being. And I admired the entrepreneurial spirit she shares with her husband, Jaime. Their colorful estate presented such a contrast to the windowless graduate office I worked in. I covered my walls with Guatemalan textiles and Post-it notes. 2 things you've got to do is sing in your local community and communicate to the rest of the world. Neither the bright fabrics nor Pete Seeger's words did much to lift my spirits. At the time, I didn't admit to myself or to Daphne or Mary that I needed role models of women going against the status quo. My accident and injury had suddenly altered my identity as a woman. In the face of challenges, I needed to be shown the possibility of doing things differently and still have a fulfilling life, a healthier life, day by day. Later on, through the Farmscape performance, I would come to respect Lana's voice as well, as she so poignantly expressed how she felt about her organic garden. All things need to grow, need to be nurtured in their own way. Each thing has its own tastes, whether cool or hot, and we need to take each living thing on its own terms. There is no one right way. There is no one right treatment. Everything is different. I was different. My own health challenges and range of emotions allowed me to appreciate the feistiness of Daphne and Lana. They persevered in the face of unjust circumstances. Even though I didn't grow up on a farm and didn't have direct experience with the land, I could relate to Christy's bitterness about her lack of choice, her sense of helplessness and frustration, and the determination to do what she had to do to hold on. I was in that space. I was struggling to hold on. I was in a place where I needed to renew myself. Farmscape gave me an outlet to play, to expand and experiment with other aspects of my identity. It gave me a route back to the self I felt was getting lost in the academy and in the medical institutions. I admired these women who wouldn't allow their voices to be taken from them despite their difficult circumstances. I wanted my voice back. I wanted my body back. And to revision myself, I needed the gumption these women modeled. I needed the gumption to put my inhibitions aside and pick up a pen and learn to write.
So Jason Arbogast came into our MFA program from Detroit, and he now has his MFA, and he has really stuck with this project. He calls it the course that will never end.
My essay is titled Swearing in Public. If I can adjust this a little bit. Okay. So, question always comes up is, why am I still with this 5 years later? And the answer is pretty simple. I like to swear in public. When I read Farmscape, I read the parts of Nate, Monsanto higher-up, whose family used to farm, and John, who we were exposed to earlier, a guy who graduated from high school and had gone right to work at a processing plant ripping out pig guts, which he had no problems describing graphically. These people couldn't be more different. I interviewed the real Nate for the class, and that's why I wanted to read his part. And some Farmscape male actors had to take double parts for the production. John's role could not be confused with Nate, so they made a good pairing. A Nate-John double role also illustrated and contrasted two sides of the corporate world of farming, manager and worker. And, I got to swear loudly and frequently in public. I knew how to read Nate because I'd interviewed him. All I had to do was look at my notes. John, however, was a problem. All I had to go on was what the script contained. Would have been easy to make him into a kind of cartoon character, all bluster and high energy and profanity, or worse, some kind of racist caricature. But that wouldn't have helped the play, and it wouldn't have given it the impact that we wanted. And quite frankly, it would have been insulting to John. So what was I going to do? Well, the answer is pretty simple, actually. I thought of my dad. I grew up in a small farming community, a lot like the ones Farmscape depicts. My family wasn't a farming one, though. I knew a few farming families, but that was it. My grandpa and my mom did have small gardens, but that's a long way from farming. No, my family was the other working class type common to my area, blue collar. My grandparents worked in the cereal factories, and my dad and my uncle worked in an auto parts factory. I didn't necessarily know farming and farmers, but I did know factory workers. And John and my dad have a few things in common. Both have more stories than you can ever listen to, Both are, at their hearts, genuinely nice and friendly people, and both have the sort of mild, learned racism and tendency towards swearing that makes the rest of us squirm a bit when they start to tell a joke. I had to channel my dad's edgy speech patterns, but in a good way. Luckily or unluckily, I'm fine with saying things that make people feel uncomfortable. And while this includes swearing in public and saying mildly racist things for a part, it also includes the heart of what Farmscape is, and that's saying things that make people feel uncomfortable. And if I get to do it while swearing, all the better. I'm making a big deal out of profanity. I admit it. It's something you don't hear a lot in public. It isn't polite, but neither is the message of Farmscape. Screw polite. Politeness only gets you so far. After that, you have to be honest, no matter how awkward that might make people feel. Yes, now is when I pull out my soapbox. I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't comfortable with a lot of what Farmscape had to say. Just like everyone else, I grew up believing that more is better, that science knows best, and that progress means always moving forward. I still want to believe these things, but they're not true. Problem is, not many people want to say anything about it. It wouldn't be polite. As John's story points out, more isn't always better. Just because we can kill and process animals at an inhuman rate doesn't mean that we should. Not only are safety and accountability lost in the process, but a little bit of our humanity is too. I'm not saying we should all become vegetarians, though that is a viable option. It'd be tough for me. I like meat, sorry. I'm saying that the mechanization in the assembly line-like fashion in which we butcher animals is cruel. And it's on a level that most of us don't want to know about. If we did, we might be forced to actually think about where our food comes from and just what corners have been cut to make it so cheap. Nate's story, as positive as he tries to make it sound, shows just how arrogant science tends to be when it's trying to make things better, and how corporations don't like to mention the negatives of what they do. For all his pride in how Monsanto is helping farmers and helping the environment, he doesn't say anything about how Europe still doesn't accept genetically modified crops. Europe considers them unproven. Nor does Nate say anything about the level of groundwater contamination caused by the overuse of pesticides. Farmscape does. Farmscape also points out that we should be looking backwards for solutions as well as forward. There's wisdom in the old ways, but this goes contrary to what we, as youth-obsessed, ever-moving society, tend to think. Monsanto, and therefore Nate, who serves as their proxy in the play, embodies this notion of constantly pushing at the boundaries, never really looking back, never really worrying about the consequences. This is a corporate mentality, not a human mentality. The Great Recession showed us what that kind of mentality in the financial and housing sectors does. And I'm terrified of what that kind of mentality would do for the farming, and most likely the ecological equivalent of the 2008 sector collapse. For the past 4 years, I've been more than happy to continue working with Farmscape. 5 years now, actually. Its ability to show people the dangers, problems, and possible consequences of our society's current farming narrative is vital. And Farmscape lays it all out in a non-confrontational, sit-down, let me tell you a story sort of way. It's like getting together with a few of your neighbors and talking about what's going on in their lives, rather than being lectured by a bunch of people you don't know or trust. And if I get to swear in public a bit, I'm not going to complain.
We cleaned up the script for you tonight because
You got the sanitizer.
yeah, because we're on TV. But the real script is in the book, so buy the book. More than one reason to buy the book. All right. Eric Klotzbach, actually, I've known since I was born. She was my neighbor. We grew up in Manning, Iowa together, and then she ended up in Independence, Iowa, and she and her son, John, who's the editor of the newspaper there, came to a Farmscape show in Cedar Falls. And we went out after the show, and she said, we have to bring this to Independence. Well, they were the best producers that I've ever known in these 5 years, and they hustled around and created a community show, a town show, and we did it at the Agri Museum And it was a wonderful show because we had like live chickens in the background on the set. And it was just great. And goats. And they worked so hard organizing all the actors and, doing the publicity. There's a lot that goes into a production. So Mary Klotzbach is going to read a little bit from her piece on doing a community show in Independence, Iowa.
Harnessing our assets. Our first task was finding a venue for the Farmscape performance. Independence, Iowa is a relatively small rural community with a population hovering around 6,000. It is the southwest gateway to northeast Iowa. For some, it is a bedroom community or community of compromise, conveniently located within an easy commute to the better jobs in the bigger cities of Waterloo and Cedar Rapids. However, Independence is fortunate to be located at the crossroads of two major highways, US 20 and Iowa 150. It has an active rail line and a small but constantly improving public airport. Independence locally employs more than 1,000 citizens in our light manufacturing firms, creamery, state mental health institute, downtown shops and businesses, county courthouse, and school system. The community supports a summer farmers market at the historic Wapsipinicon Mill site with produce from local growers in Independence. Independence has also invested in a farm-to-school program where many of the participants have shucked corn or pitted strawberries for school lunches. School children have garden plots which they tend and harvest on a school ground for their own use. Many small towns might look to their schools for a Farmscape venue. The independent schools have award-winning instrumental and vocal music programs and a growing speech and drama program despite the lack of an auditorium. Local schools have come to refer to the high school gymnasium as the gymnatorium. The gifted and persevering music directors have made the most of a difficult situation by utilizing portable speaker and platform systems. As a side note, almost a year after our Farmscape performance, a bond issue was passed to build a new junior-senior high school complete with a 700-seat auditorium. So we're very proud of that. We finally picked a museum for our venue. Independence is also the home of the Heartland Acres Agribition Center, an agricultural museum in the Silos and Smokestacks National Heritage Area. The area, which comprises central to northeast Iowa, is one of 49 federally designated heritage areas in the nation and is an affiliated area of the National Park Service. On the lower end of the barn-shaped museum, an Amish buggy stands next to a mechanical cow which children love to milk. A small movie theater traces the history of our area in the film. There are chicken incubators for the spring babies, milk cans and bales of straw, not to mention a faint aroma of farmed animals from the livestock area next door. On the upper level are displays of pioneer and modern implements against an encompassing panorama backdrop painted by a local artist, John Schaefer. Outside, a Texas longhorn bull, pigs, goats, cattle, chicken, geese, and ducks live in the summer. Big Bud, the world's largest farm tractor, is housed in a machine shed along with historically significant tractors, combines, and other implements. A one-room schoolhouse is also part of the exhibition. Connected to the museum on the east end is an area filled with privately owned antique cars and a rotating display of artifacts from the Buchanan County Historical Society. The east end of the complex is an event center used for banquets and exhibitions. When we first approached Heartland Acres, the executive director generously waived the facility fee and blocked out a section of the event center for the performance. One of the early concerns, funding, was overcome when Mary Swander, with the backing of the Leopold Center for Sustainable Agriculture at Iowa State University, helped pay for her 3-day residency by transferring money from a venue which had been forced to cancel because of a flood. The other half came from a very generous business person who wished to remain anonymous. Laces, with the leadership of our president, Mary Kay Johnson, legal secretary, and active volunteer, persuaded people to add one more event to their calendars. I have a brochure from our local arts group called Laces. Mary Kay was the hub for coordinating communications and organizing various tasks. My son John, as a staff member of the Independence Bulletin Journal, helped contact and rally participants also. He promoted publicity in the local papers, radio, cable TV, posters, and a website. Literary clubs, Ladies Musical Society, Red Hats, PEOs, Friends of the Library, and the Chamber of Commerce all spread the word and gave support as well. We chose the cast from acquaintances and friends who had been active in community activities such as churches, 4-H, Independent City Council, civic organizations. The cast members included farmers, teachers, a John Deere engineer, a full-time auctioneer, a priest, a secretary, and a great keyboard pianist. We thought we had everything lined up when we hit a bump in the road. The position of Heartland Acres executive director had a change of personnel, and our Farmscape commitments were not on file. We were dismayed to learn that the events center auditorium was booked with a paying client in the transition. We had to scramble and compromise a little, but together we worked out a new plan. We were given the opportunity for a more intimate setting in the museum. We were tucked into a corner of the museum's first floor where we could close the barn doors to the small animal area and hang ordinary bed sheets for a backdrop slideshow like the one that you saw this evening. The ceiling above was exposed wooden planks of the second floor exhibition area. We were able to borrow risers from the school, corn shocks from the museum, and Miss Mary Swander's portable benches to complete our minimalist staging. The pastor of St. John's Episcopal Church, Reverend Sue Ann Raymond, opened her fellowship hall for 2 evening practices where the cast bonded in conversations and refreshments. During the day, Mary taught 2 workshops at our high school and participated in a book signing at a downtown shop. Then came the grand event. We had a wonderful performance and a great crowd. We had decided to use the PG-rated script for our community. It still packed a punch, though, when Father McManus, a local priest speaking as Martin, called riding a favorite tractor as good as sex. He was a character. Since there is a strong emphasis on conservation in this valley of the Wapsipinicon River, many observations and post-performance conversations centered around those aspects. Farmscape was a very effective way to enlighten and encourage people to be better stewards of our soil and environment. It has helped us to appreciate and preserve our heritage and encouraged us to be innovative in our plans for a promising future. Beyond the immediate event, Farmscape sparked further discussions around the dinner tables or coffee clutches, committee meetings, political groups, and clubs. The character representing the packing house employee brought up the tragedy of the raid at Postville, Iowa. The need for government regulations as well as more humane immigration reform. The winery couple reflected a growing interest in new enterprises, and the auctioneer reminded us of the changing structure of family farms to factory farms with new environmental problems. We became more aware of the ethanol plant at Fairbank and the growing number of wind turbines. The school board is considering adding a course in agriculture to the curriculum when the new school is built. There was speculation about the ongoing establishment of Monsanto and genetic engineering west of town. Crop dusting and expansion of the local airport were topics of interest. The county engineer emphasized the need to repair farm-to-market roads and bridges. Concern was expressed about the changes in the Buchanan County Amish farmers as they seek jobs in construction to maintain their livelihood and preserve their lifestyle. We became more aware of the traffic pattern of trucks passing through our downtown and the effect on our economy from the many local families in the trucking business carrying livestock and dairy products all over the nation. One group visited the corn cob processing plant, which collects residue from hybrid seed companies and recycles it for use in green ways. Conservation leaders have continued with programs to plant switchgrass and trees and to improve drainage systems. Our master gardeners enrich the beauty of Independence and model a healthy lifestyle. Not that Farmscape has brought about a revolution, but it has helped fuel positive change and dialogue in our community. Thank you.
That was great, and we're going to finish with Harvey Mcllrath, who was one of the actors in the Grinnell Arts Council production, and he played Randy, but playing that part sort of had a lot of resonance with him as an individual, growing up, his childhood and his adulthood. And the Grinnell production was great because Harley was there, and his uncle was also in the play, who was an auctioneer. Yeah.
The curse of Farmscape is that I played Randy the hog farmer, and then last winter they built a hog confinement a quarter mile of the road down the... So... My Uncle Stan stands on stage. He's Mike, the successful farmer. He stands on stage, and he's Mike, but he looks like Uncle Stan because Mary's had us put together our own costumes. And Stan's worn what he would have worn anyway. What's the difference? He's already a farmer. I farmed 1,700 acres, Stan says. Mike says. My father farmed and my grandpa did too. And whether he's speaking for Mike or for himself, it's true. He farms more than 1,700 acres, and the Mcllraths have always farmed. Like Mike, Stan used his dad's machinery when he started. And he farmed his dad's land. But then Stan says, Mike says, when he started farming, he had nothing to lose. That's wrong. Later, he says it again. I really had nothing to lose because I really didn't have anything going into it. I didn't have any down payments or anything purchased. You take zero away from zero, you still have zero. Mike's talking about his bank account. He's talking about the business he went into. And that's where it becomes clear that my Uncle Stan is only mouthing the words of a character, because Stan had everything to lose when he took over his father's farm. His was not a business decision. It was the fulfillment of a way of life. There was no decision. Being a farmer was who he was, who he had always been. Stan was a farmer before he was born. You take the farm away from the farmer, you take away his soul. I'm on stage as Randy, the guy with the hog confinement. I'd say it's roughly 100 foot by 300 foot, I say, talking about the lagoon that holds the liquid hog shit. The script says feet, but I say foot, because that's how it rolls off my tongue. That's how my dad would say it, foot instead of feet. That's how I would say it if I hadn't gone off to college for 20 years and wound up selling books for a living instead of farming. It's 15 foot deep, I say, and it's natural. I hear my voice saying it like I'm listening to the other me talking, the me I used to be, the me I'd be if I hadn't left. Why am I up here? Mary's had us put together our own costumes, and I didn't try much harder than Stan did. What are you going to wear, my wife says. What's a hog farmer look like? She's a city girl. I go to my closet and I take out the plaid shirt I never wear. Button down front, no buttons on the collar. I never wear it because it's the kind of shirt the boys would wear to the co-op meeting, to the West Side Diner for coffee, to the sale barn if they cleaned up. It's a hand-me-down from my dad. I grab a pair of jeans, brown leather boots. They should be Wolverines, but I've got Doc Martens. I lay it all out on the bed. Then I get a pair of scissors and I cut the sleeves out of the plaid shirt. I walk over to my parents' house next door and ask to borrow a cap. Which one, my dad says. I'm Randy, the hog farmer, I say. What's that mean, my dad says. Give me one you don't want back, I say. Of course he gives me a nice one, because I'm going to be on stage. I go home and I put it all on, my costume. I stand in front of the mirror. You look like Eddie Vedder, my wife says. Grunge, the godchild of Neil Young, seed corn caps, flannel shirts, and electric guitars. I look like the kid who showed the reserve champion market pig at the 1974 Poweshiek County Fair, I say. My wife doesn't know what that means. It means I look like myself. I look like everything I chose not to be. Stan and I are only 4 years apart. He's my uncle, but he's only 4 years older. When we were boys, my house was right next to his, the yard separated by a row of peonies. In summer, Stan and I rode our bikes out the dirt lane that ran from the barnyard west along a row of honeysuckle, and then turned north along the web fence until it reached the pasture gate. When we were older, we drove tractors up and down the lane, pulling wagon loads of corn, beans, and racks of hay. Up and down the lane we went until the packed tracks the tires made turned to powdered dust. When we planted at my grandmother's farm, Stan and I played in the field or in the fence rows. More often, we sat on the fenders of the tractor, my grandfather sitting turned in the seat, one eye on the field ahead and the other on the planter behind. Or we followed the planter with my father, digging in the soil with his finger to check the depth of the kernel, the distance between the seeds. In the house, my great-grandmother sat at the kitchen table and watched the men through the window. My great-aunts, Ruby and Mabel, peeled potatoes and set the table for dinner. My mother helped them, and my grandmother hovered between the work in the kitchen and the work in the field, ready if a shout came from the field that help was needed. Before long, a car would pull in the driveway, and my great-aunt Lizzie would get out, and Uncle Alec, drawn home by the work, because this is how it had been since Lizzie was a girl. There was her home, this was her home, and the men were planting. An old woman, she would scurry from the car into the house, take up a paring knife and a potato, her excuse to sit at the table, to be part of the family. An old man, Alec would saunter through the gate and out to the field to be with the men, even if for him, being with the men meant leaning against a fence post at the edge of the field. And perhaps he would step away from the fence post to catch a seed bag taken by the wind, roll it, and tuck it under his arm. He would have done his bit. He would have a place at the table. When dinner was ready, if we were nearby, Stan and I would be sent to the field to tell the men, and when the men had walked to the house, bringing Uncle Alec with them, they would roll their sleeves above their elbows and wait their turn at the wash basin. Mabel and Ruby would bring the food to the table, roast beef on a platter, boiled potatoes, beef gravy, green beans, bread and butter, canned peaches. And when my grandfather and my father had scrubbed their hands clean, scrubbed their forearms to the elbows, Alec, too, drying his hands with a towel, they would come to the kitchen and find their places at the table. We crowded around the table then, Stan and I, my father and mother, my grandparents, the great-aunts and great-uncle, great-grandma. Together, the family ate. This is what I left. But it's true, too, that if you don't leave a place, in time the place leaves you. My grandparents' house, the house in which Stanley lived as a boy, is gone now. And gone is the little house in which I lived with my mother and father. Gone are the peonies in the yards. The lane down which we rode our bikes and drove tractors is gone. And gone the honeysuckle, the web fence, and the pasture gate. Gone is the pasture. Gone is my great-grandmother's house. Gone the yard and the fence post on which Uncle Alec leaned. Uncle Alec himself is gone. Great-grandma, the great-aunts, Mabel and Ruby and Lizzie, my grandparents, all are gone. I miss crowding in with my family. I miss the closeness, the belonging. That is what is lost, and that is why I'm up here, pretending to be a person I might have been, pretending to be a person I chose not to be. I miss my family. I miss my uncle. I miss waking up in the morning knowing that our day will be spent together. I miss being with Stanley pressed tight between my father and grandfather in the cab of a pickup. My grandfather at the wheel, my father with his arm out the window. We're headed to town for a part, or we're headed to the sale barn. We're headed somewhere. And the wind is blowing through the cab and the dust is roiling out behind us. So here I stand on this stage because here is my uncle. We're together, doing this together. I'm Mike, my Uncle Stan says, number 51. I'm Randy, I say, number 20.
Okay, so those are the effects of Farmscape, and we have 4 different interpretations and 4 different paths and streams that the energy went out from this show. It's just really, there are now probably 1,000 people that have been involved in this show in one way or another, and you're hearing 4 voices tonight. We want to give a big shout out to Steve Semkin, our editor and publisher, who works like crazy to get his books out and noticed. And thank you to all of you who have come. I guess we have a little bit of time for some questions. If anyone has a question. Anybody? Do we have a plant? Do we have Lori.
Okay, all right. So the people who were interviewed, were they aware that were they ever sitting in the audience when the stories were presented?
Oh, yeah. In the first performance, we got as many of the real interviewees there as we could. We got almost everybody. And they've been very, very gracious about the whole thing. They've been really, really great sports. And in fact, some of them has been so good that they've played themselves in various productions. They've taken on their own roles. It's very funny to see that happen. And they've traveled with me, and some of them are more shy about it, and like, just use my name, don't take any pictures, and that's okay too. We honor that. But if those of you who were here when we were about to begin, there's a whole slideshow of the real interviewees in the production. And my students took all the pictures. They did everything, and went around, took pictures of the interviewees, and then the second slideshow that you saw up there. The first one was old-timey photos that the students went to the Ames Historical Society and found, and then the second slideshow of the farm crisis were slides by David Peterson, who's the Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. Some of you probably remember in the 80s in the farm crisis. He worked for the Des Moines Register. Other questions?
Well, you're getting ready to raise your hands. I had one, or a comment, because I would think that after the plays were done, that you would have people come up and talk to you about what they thought was real and what they thought wasn't. And I know, for example, I didn't really know anything about John Deere tractors, and when there's a line in there that John Deere tractor is the sexiest tractor alive.
That's right.
Well, I had the books delivered by this big semi-truck in my driveway, or the street, and I mentioned the title of the book to him. He said, I used to farm. And I said, is it true that the John Deere 4020 is the greatest tractor ever? And I mean, he just melted into like, oh my God, yes. It's the greatest tractor ever. And so it dawned on me. I mean, it's just, I wouldn't have known, but that's like the best endorsement ever.
Right. We did a show in Coon Rapids, Iowa, population, I think it's 900 people. And I told them for the stage dressing, to bring stuff from their farms. And so in came, bales of hay and milk cans, and things like that. And then all of a sudden, all these John Deere tractor little miniature ones, started coming up on the stage. I'm like, where'd those come from? They said they're sexy. Yeah. Yeah.
You mentioned the people at one performance that were from the Wallace family. Could you talk about that?
The Wallace family. Don't remember that one.
Was that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. There have been incredible reactions to this show. I usually have a talk back post-performance discussion afterwards. And, I've had everything happen from, I had to, mediate a shouting match between an organic farmer and a CAFO farmer once. And then this was probably the most moving moment. This was in Clinton, Iowa. And our main character here is named Martin. And he lost his farm, the farm crisis. He was just a kid, and the farm duties had fallen upon him and his brother, and they tried, 16 and 17-year-old guys to keep the farm going in the crisis, and they just couldn't. And his brother's name was Ben. So he's kind of our narrator, main character in the show. So I go into Clinton and we do the show, and we had all the, people in Clinton taking the parts, and they did a great job, and we had a nice audience and everything. And so I get up to do the talk back and ask for questions, and this man gets up in the front row. He's a banker in a three-piece suit, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? And he got up and he thanked everybody for coming, thanked me, the students for writing the show, and then he burst into tears. And he said, I'm Ben. That auction you saw in front of you was my auction. That was my farm that you were writing about. And so, there was just silence and in the whole auditorium. And so, there's a deep wound in the Farmscape about what has happened to our landscape, what has happened to our family farms. And, he's probably much more successful than he would have been on the farm. He went to Iowa State, got a degree in finance, became a banker, and as a banker, he was trying to help farmers hang on to their land, ironically. But he's made a lot more money than he would have if he'd stayed on the farm, but that's where his heart was. And so, we can sit in Iowa City and be smug and not really comprehend that we are surrounded by this, largeness around us with huge environmental problems, huge sociological problems. And, my students in my class even, there wasn't a single student in the class. We had 10 students who had grown up on a farm, but they were all one or two generations removed from it. And we had to stop the class a little ways in because I realized that really we needed to explore agricultural issues more. And so we stopped and had a reading period where we, started researching what the changing farmscape was, and the students were blown away. And here we are in the middle of it. And so that's the effect that Farmscape has had. It's been this bridge between, our complacency and the real problems that are there, the bridge between the city mice and the country mice.
Okay, great. Well, we've run out of our TV and radio time, but if you have questions, these five will be up here signing books and can answer your questions. And in the end, we'd like to thank Prairie Lights for hosting the reading tonight.
Great. Thank you. So come and buy a book.